Today, we're at the historic Route 66 ghost town of Two Guns, Arizona, home of the historic Canyon Diablo Bridge and the Apache Death Cave. Where legend has it, Navajo warriors killed 42 members of an Apache raiding party in 1878. So we're going to explore the ruins of the town and hopefully the Apache Death Cave as well. Two Guns, Arizona has an amazing and frankly downright crazy history. Nowadays, Two Guns is just a single exit off Interstate 40 east of Flagstaff. The first thing you'll notice when pulling off the road is this abandoned and much graffitied gas station. There's actually someone camped out here, so we aren't going to explore it too much. Plus, there are some much more interesting and much older things to be found at Two Guns. Behind the gas station is the remains of an old campground. Here we are at the campground's pool, which is supposedly a very popular spot for skateboarders. It's definitely a popular spot for graffiti artists. The pool building is pretty much the only building still standing here at the campground. As you can see, most of the others haven't really fared all that well. This building is pretty much just a roof now. This campground was open from the 1960s up until the 1980s, and looking around, you can still find the places for RV hookups everywhere. Here's another one. It doesn't look like any of these were removed when the campground shut down. From the campground, you can just kind of see Arizona's meteor crater, where a meteor struck the Earth about 50,000 years ago. It's a pretty cool place to visit on its own, and they have a great museum there. Every time we go, I comment on how lucky they are that the meteor just missed the gift shop when it struck. Alright, let's head down this abandoned portion of Route 66 and get to some of the older ruins in Two Guns and talk about the history of this wild place. We should also be able to get to the historic Canyon Diablo Bridge and hopefully find the infamous Apache Death Cave. Well, here are the ruins of the old zoo, as you could probably tell by the big giant mountain lions written across the top. Let's explore these ruins and we'll kind of talk about the history of Two Guns while we do it. Two Guns was first settled in the early 1900s by a man named Ed Randolph, who built a store here. With the National Old Trails Highway going through here starting in 1907, this was the perfect place for a rest stop. So in 1922, Earl and Louise Cundiff purchased 320 acres of land from Randolph at this location for about $1,000 and built a store, restaurant, and gas station. Here's where things start to get a little crazy. A guy named Harry E. Miller shows up in the area and leases property from the Cundiffs in 1925. Miller starts claiming he's an Apache Indian and calling himself Chief Crazy Thunder and begins constructing this zoo. Here at the zoo, he had animals such as mountain lions, Gila monsters, coral snakes, bobcats, birds, and even a lynx. And I just want to stop for a minute and look at these cages. I mean, I can't imagine animals such as mountain lions being enclosed in such a small area. I mean, this seems really cruel to the animals. Keeping animals in enclosures like these is something that people were able to get away with in the 1920s, but is thankfully something that, really wouldn't fly today. But getting back to Chief Crazy Thunder Miller himself, he also opened a restaurant and Indian gift shop here and started giving tours of the Apache Death Cave, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. So Miller had signs placed along Route 66 advertising his establishment, which he called Fort Two Guns, supposedly as an homage to silent movie actor William Two Guns Hart, whom Miller claimed to have worked with previously. If we look back this way, we could see how close this zoo was to Canyon Diablo. And there's the historic Canyon Diablo Bridge. In 1926, the National Old Trails Highway here formally became U.S. Route 66. That same year, Miller and Earl Cundiff got into a disagreement over the lease's terms. Miller ended up shooting Cundiff in cold blood, killing the unarmed man. Miller claimed it was self-defense and was somehow acquitted, but I guess karma wasn't on his side. Soon afterwards, he was mauled by not one, but two of his mountain lions, and if that wasn't bad enough, he was then bitten by one of his own venomous Gila monsters. In 1929, the interior of Miller's store burned, and soon after he just left the state, but not without taking the turquoise jewelry, silver, and other expensive merchandise with him. I know the whole thing is pretty nuts, but we haven't even gotten to the Apache Death Cave yet. In 1929, the widowed Louise Cundiff ended up building her own tourist store, and in 1934 opened the Two Guns Texaco service station along a new alignment of Route 66. Someone else bought the store and station in 1950, and then it was sold again in 1963. A fire in 1971 pretty much ended the town as a tourist stop, aside from the campground we visited earlier. Now let's go try to check out the Canyon Diablo Bridge, which actually predates the town and is on the National Register of Historic Places. So here's the Canyon Diablo Bridge. The bridge was built in 1915 and was part of Route 66 from 1926 to 1938. It also looks like there is a fence in between us and the bridge, so let's see if we could find our way around and get on the bridge. As settlers started coming through this area in the mid-1800s, this location was recognized as a good place to cross Canyon Diablo. So wagon trails and later the first cars would follow paths that zigzagged along the canyon and then cross the usually dry riverbed. The addition of this bridge in 1915 was a huge improvement for travelers and made crossing through this area so much easier. The bridge cost $9,000 to build, which is about $260,000 in today's dollars. The Canyon Diablo Bridge was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1988. The ultimate dilemma: go around the fence or go through the fence? Well, I've made it over to the bridge. Now you're probably wondering if I took the long way and went around the fence or if I went through the fence. Well, I'll give you a hint. It is hot today. It's easily 100 degrees. So you can pretty much guess how I did it. Let's take a look over the side here. This thing is pretty high up. But if you'll notice on the bridge how one of the walls has slots on it and the other one is solid, that's supposedly to protect the bridge from flooding. The upstream wall is the solid wall to stop water from getting on the bridge, while the downstream wall has the slots to let it drain. But if you look how high this bridge is, I just can't imagine there being that much water that flooding this bridge was a huge concern, but I guess it must happen for them to design the bridge that way. It looks like there's some ruins on the other side of the bridge, so let's walk over and check those out as well. I'm not exactly sure what these are the ruins of. I know there was another business that started around the same time as Old Chief Crazy Thunder's business, and I'm not sure if that was here or if that was elsewhere. There's some other ruins further down the road a little bit as well. So I'm not exactly sure what these are the ruins for. If you know, let me know in the comments. But yeah, these are pretty cool too. Just look how big this building was. I mean, this is pretty huge. And if we take a look across the canyons, we could see the ruins of our next stop, which is where the Apache Death Cave should be. Alright, we've made it over here, and the Apache Death Cave should be just right down here in this hole. And yep, it looks like there is the pathway to it. Alright, let's head down because this doesn't look unsafe at all. These rocks look like the better bet than the wood.
Just thought that was a snake right there. So we've made it to the entrance of the Apache Death Cave, and I'm gonna head inside and take a look around. This may be the stupidest thing we've ever done on this channel. Hopefully there's not a mountain lion or snakes or any sort of creatures in there, but let's take a look around the Apache Death Cave.
Alright, we're heading in. I swear if we run into some sort of wild animal, well, I guess actually wild animals are not really much of a problem. I'd much rather run into a wild animal than a wild human in here. Lots of loose rocks here at the beginning, and it looks like we're going to have to duck down a little bit here. I think the story of the Apache Death Cave is one of the better known Route 66 legends, but we'll talk about the story as we explore through the cave. So the story goes, in 1878, a band of Apaches raided 2 Navajo camps, killing everyone except for 3 girls who were kidnapped. And it looks like we're coming to another opening in the cave already. These rocks here, this wall, that's part of a fake cliff dwelling that was placed here in the 1920s by Henry Miller as part of his tour of the Apache caves. So let's go a little bit deeper in. So here's a side tunnel. Looks like you have to crawl to get in there, and I'm not about to do that today. So let's head back down the main tunnel. So getting back to 1878 and the Apache raid of the Navajo camps. Other Navajo warriors attempted to follow the Apaches, but the raiders seemed to vanish into thin air. While scouting along the edge of Canyon Diablo, they heard voices from beneath them and warm air coming up from a fissure in the ground. They quickly realized they were above a cave, which the Apaches, their horses, and possibly the 3 Navajo girls were hidden. The Navajo found the mouth of the cave and lit a fire intending to smoke out their enemies. The Apache tried to escape the cave and were killed by the waiting Navajo warriors. And wow, this room is huge. Take a look at this. I mean, this is a massive room here, and it's not too far from the entrance. This thing here looks like it's holding the crack in the ceiling together like a staple. I don't know if this was used to hang something or what this is for, but yeah, this room is definitely kind of sketchy here. Let's keep going. So getting back to the story, when the Navajo found out that the Navajo girls who had been kidnapped were already dead, it was decided to kill all the Apaches in the cave in revenge. After those trapped in the cave had used all their water in an attempt to put out the flames, they began cutting the throats of their horses in order to use the blood to douse the flames. But as the corpses of their horses piled up against the opening, and the Navajo continued to fuel the flames with sagebrush, so this looks like about as far as we could go. I'm not fitting any further down there. Let's see how dark it is in here. Let me turn off the flashlight. Yeah, it's pretty dark in here. So it was said that 42 Apaches died in this cave. It was later said that Henry Miller, old Chief Crazy Thunder himself, after turning the cave into a tourist attraction, would find the Apache bones and sell them as souvenirs. It's a really fantastic story and makes climbing through this cave pretty eerie. The only problem is the story is almost certainly a complete work of fiction. There are no historical sources anywhere to support the story of the Apaches being killed in this cave. The first known time this cave was ever called the Apache Death Cave, or the story of the slaughter was told, was in 1967 in an article in Big West magazine, then a year later in a 1968 book on the history of two guns. Both the magazine article and the book were written by the same person, Gladwell Richardson, though the magazine article was written under an alias. A number of other facts in the book, such as Billy the Kid hiding out in two guns, have been widely debunked by historians. The fact that there is no evidence of the Apache story anywhere in the 90 years between when it happened and when Richardson wrote about it makes one skeptical. But having climbed this far in, I can't imagine 42 people plus horses in here either. While Miller certainly used the cave as a tourist attraction and built these fake cliff dwellings, no historic sources use the word death in reference to the cave at all. In old pictures, you can see the cave was just called Apache Caves. There is also no evidence to support Miller ever selling bones. The Apache Death Cave is a cool tale, though, and it's helped keep the story of this Route 66 ghost town alive. And really, it's a lot more fun than the truth anyway. It is somewhat comforting to know that 40 plus Apaches probably weren't killed right here, though. Alright, now we gotta work our way back up there. Wow, it is hot today. Even though it's nice and shaded in the cave, it's still just as hot in there. And I am just drenched, covered in sweat. Take a last look back at the Apache Death Cave. Here's the ruins above the Apache Death Cave. Let's take a look inside here real quick. Wow, amazingly the roof is still here. You don't see that very often. You don't see a wooden roof still on ruins like this. Lots of graffiti in here, of course. Just for reference, I'll show how close this building is to the Apache Death Cave. Just right out the front door, a few feet. And here we are, the entrance to the Apache Death Cave again.
So that's our look at Two Guns, Arizona, the historic Canyon Diablo Bridge, and the Apache Death Cave. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.